Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are in different time zones, as we are in Mexico at 8 a.m. and in China at 10 p.m. In this moment. You are very welcome to this conference on generational perspectives on the family enterprise, not as different as you would think. We are very pleased to introduce this conference, this global webinar that covers 5 continents, 38 countries, and we have more than 350 participants from these countries. My name is John Martinez, and I'm the director of the Center of Families in Business at Esade Business School at Universidad de los Andes in Chile, in Santiago, Chile. I'm very pleased now to introduce Dr. Andrea Cuomo from Julius Baer. Let me introduce properly Andrea. Andrea is the managing director and head of the sub-region Hispanic Americas at Bank Julius Baer in Zurich. He is now in Zurich. Now, Andrea, you are going to give us some welcoming words. Go ahead, please, Andrea.
Thank you, John, and thank you for the kind introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to all the participants of this conference. First of all, let me congratulate, in the name of Julius Baer, all the professors and academic employees who contributed to this pioneering and groundbreaking white paper. As we will hear today, a younger generation in the family enterprise do not perceive the world, as the title of the conference, as differently from the older generation. Family businesses are the engine of the all economies, and it is our pleasure to see that the next generation think alike of the older ones. At Julius Baer, we welcome the confirmation that our professor achieved, that younger generation are highly entrepreneurial in their mindset and eager to get started in the family businesses. We know the benefits associated with a solid foundation, which is why we encourage and help our clients to set up their enterprises for generations to come by emphasizing joint philanthropic ventures and also family governance. We at Bank Julius Baer trust you will find the conversation today very insightful, and you will probably get some valuable ideas to concentrate your efforts in the family business. But let me conclude here and reiterate my congratulations to the team, and thanks a lot to give Julius Baer the opportunity to support the white paper. Back to you, John.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, and especially your bank, who was a big support and generously has supported and sponsored our research. Now, let me introduce the research institutions and authors that have contributed to this white paper. First of all, in Chile, Esade Business School at Universidad de los Andes, 3 people, myself, John Martinez, and Maria de los Angeles Tapia, and Carolina von Hausen. In Spain, Esade Business School in Barcelona, Maria Jose Parada and Paula Infantes. Also in Spain, but worldwide, because this is a global consulting company, Lansberg, Gersick and Associates, Neus Feliu from this company. Then in the US, the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, Jennifer Pendergast, Maggie Kong Yuen, Sachin Waikar, and Tong Su. In Mexico, the Instituto Tecnológico y de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey, el TEC de Monterrey, María Fonseca and Fernando Sandoval. And finally, in China, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Winnie Qiang Peng. And as a matter of fact, we will have 5 speakers, and the lead will be taken by Jennifer Pendergast from Kellogg School of Management, the John Ward Clinical Professor of Family Enterprise, and the executive director of this center, the Center for Family Enterprises at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. She will take the lead in a couple of minutes. Then we'll present Neus Feliu from Lansberg, Gersick and Associates. Then Maria Jose Parada from Esade Business School. She's the associate professor at the Strategy and General Management Department. Following Maria Fonseca, the director of the Instituto de Familias Empresarias del Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. And finally, Winnie Kiang Peng, the director of the Tanoto Center for Asian Family Business and Entrepreneurship Studies at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Okay, so Jennifer, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and welcome to everyone this morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm honored to be part of the team that John just presented. I also want to say a special thanks to those in the audience who participated in the survey. Family enterprises face unique challenges, and we need family business stakeholders to participate in research to better understand what's happening in our world. So today, let me tell you a little bit about what motivated our group to do this study. Across the world, we had noticed decreased interest in younger generations joining the family enterprise, as well as a resulting increased activity by business owning families to engage next generation members. So we wanted to understand better whether in fact younger generations were joining the family enterprise in decreasing numbers, and if so, what may be causing that challenge. Simultaneously, all of us see press coverage and research that suggests that millennials and post-millennials, younger generations, have very different expectations regarding the workplace and their values and interests. So these trends converge in a concern about the long-term future of family enterprises if we can't attract next generation members as owners and leaders. These trends also suggest a potential for a difficulty in a cross-generational dialogue to define a shared ownership vision for the future. So we joined together as a global research team to investigate millennial attitudes towards the family enterprise. We have a robust sample of survey respondents totaling over 1,300 around the world. You'll notice that our research centers, where those of us who conducted the survey efforts have the majority of those respondents come in the US, Chile, Mexico, Spain, and China. However, we had a number of respondents come from other countries around the world as well. So we have a pretty robust understanding of what these issues look like from a global perspective. Today, we'll focus primarily on data and responses at a global level, but we also will, at the end, talk a little bit about some of the country-based differences that we saw. And if you are interested more to learn about how the data looked across countries, we encourage you to read the report that has a very detailed section on how the data look different across the world. First, let me share a little bit more detail about what the respondent demographics looked like. So our primary interest was generational differences. When we collected the data, we collected this across 6 different generation groups. However, when we began to look at the data, we realized that the responses and similarities kind of showed up among a group that was above 40 and a group that was below 40. So today, when you hear us talking about the responses, we'll be talking about the over 40 and the under 40 groups and comparing those to each other. So the millennials and centennials grouped together and the classics through Gen X grouped together. We'll also share responses based on differentiation in gender, because we saw some interesting differentiation in our sample based on gender of respondents, as well as whether or not respondents have children. We also took a look at the data from the size of the family enterprise in terms of revenues, as well as the generation of the family enterprise, but saw less differences on these factors, so we'll not be reporting much on them today. You'll notice a little bit about differentiation in the audience. In general, our respondents were a bit older in the US, and the US had a skew toward fewer females in our response rate. And then our audience in the US had more children than others, we think probably because that skews older. So there is some difference in demographics across our sample as we take a look at country-based findings. So what are some of our key takeaways from this research? And then we'll get more into the detail of the data behind it. First of all, surprisingly, and I think somewhat comfortingly to our group, the generations aren't as different as we might have thought in terms of their attitudes and expectations towards the family enterprise. We also found that global respondents aren't as different as we think. So while certainly the country or the region of the world in which you sit affects how you think about the world, that in the family business world, we see more similarity than difference around the world. We saw that this under 40 group, the millennials and post-millennials, are actually involved in the family enterprise and they aspire to take on leadership roles in the future. So that's encouraging, and harkening back to Andrea's remarks about hoping that we get that next generation involved in the business, we see encouraged by the fact that we do see under 40s wanting to be involved. We also see the older and the younger generations largely aligned on their agenda for the business. So what they think their family enterprises need to do to be successful in the future. However, there are a couple things we need to be mindful of that we'll report on later. First, steps that you take to develop your next generation members. We saw some great differences between what the older generation and the younger generation believed was needed to prepare that next generation to take charge. And we need to watch out for some characteristics that impact current and future generation engagement. Namely, we'll speak about gender as well as whether people have children or not. So let's get into the data. First of all, I'm going to share a section on what the next generation looks like today. And just a reminder, when we talk about next gens, we're talking about respondents in the 20 to 40 age range. We did not allow participants to take the study below 20 years of age, so 20 to 40, and what are typically referred to as either millennials and centennials or Gen Y and Gen Z. Those are our respondents when we're talking about the next generation. We asked, one of the first questions that we asked the group of respondents is, what are your interests? And people had an opportunity to look at a long list of interests, from family to studies, friends, work, leisure, health, various different ways, sports that you may spend your time. And we were very encouraged to see that across the board, across all the demographics, family was a very high response rate. That's the second column, or the second horizontal of data on this. So another thing to take note as you look at through the responses that we show here, we asked people to respond on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest and 1 the lowest. So a mean of 4.91 interest in the family, as an example, would be extremely high. Good news, family in general, a top-rated interest for those above 40 and below 40, top-rated interest for male and female, for those with children and without children, and across the size ranges of our enterprise. You'll notice an asterisk on a few of the numbers here. That's because there's a significant difference in these numbers. So while the numbers, as an example, are high for both male and female interest in the family, females is significantly higher. And those who have children have a significantly higher interest in the family than those without. Probably not surprising on either of those fronts. We also asked people the extent to which the family enterprise was one of their top interests. And overall across the sample, it came in third behind family and health. So that's very encouraging, this interest in family enterprise. We also again see an interest in family enterprise that's high for the generation below 40 as well as above 40, although there is a slightly lower response rate for those below 40. We don't see any differentiation in interest in the family enterprise significantly between female and male, but we do see that those who have children are more interested in the family enterprise than those that don't. And we'll speak a little bit more in detail about why it may be that having children drives this interest in the family enterprise. Next thing that we asked people is, do you identify with your family enterprise? Do I feel like I'm part of a business owning family? And people were allowed to respond whether they see themselves as part of a business family, where they just see themselves as part of a family, but not one necessarily associating with the business, or whether they see themselves as autonomous individuals, not really affiliating with the business family or their family at all. The good news is that for the most part, people see themselves as affiliated with a business family. However, you'll see a significantly higher rate at 79% associated or affiliated with the business family who are over 40 versus 65% with those that are below 40. So we are seeing less identification with the business at a lower level. The good news is that people are identifying with their families. So we see very few, less than 5% interest across the board of people who don't associate or affiliate with their family or their business at all. But it is interesting and important to keep mindful of the fact that the generation below 40 does lag significantly behind those above 40 as seeing themselves as associated with the business family. This is where we start to get into some of the differences across gender that are something that to keep mindful of in your own family. So in the generation above 40, we have a much lower identification with the business family for females than we do for males. While this number is still relatively high, you know, almost 3/4, 71%, you are seeing people drop off with associating with the business family as females. Interestingly, we don't see that differentiation in the younger group as much. So there is some difference in the numbers, but not a significant difference overall. So something to keep mindful of if you're losing potentially the interest or attention in the business in the audience of females above 40, something to keep mindful of in your own family. We asked next generations, are they involved in their family enterprise or related family activities today? One thing that we should make note of is in the survey, when we speak of family enterprise, we defined that broadly as any related activities of the family. So being involved in the family enterprise doesn't necessarily mean you're employed as in the operations of the business. It could be that you're a board member. It could be that you attend shareholder meetings. It could be that you're part of a family council or a family governing body, or you're part of the family philanthropy. So we cast a broad net when we talked about involvement in the family enterprise. As I mentioned in our summary findings, good news is that we have over 70% of the generations below 40 who are currently involved. Certainly not as high as our over 40 audience, but a significant group, which is encouraging. However, important to be mindful of, we have 11% that have no plan to be involved either now or in the future. So that could be about 10% of your audience that you're losing in terms of interest and engagement. Truthfully, I would expect in the broader population, not our survey population, that that number is much higher. One thing that we want to acknowledge in the data that we are sharing is that we surveyed our family enterprise audiences who are connected to our research institutions for the most part. So you're much more likely to be interested or engaged, for example, if you're coming to an executive session or you got your MBA at one of the various schools that did this survey. So in general, in the general population, we would see these numbers to be somewhat lower. One of the things that was a very interesting finding, at least to me, is that having children does influence your involvement in the family enterprise, but maybe not in the way you would think. So for me personally, I would have assumed that perhaps having children in the below 40 audience would leave them less time to be involved with their family enterprise because they would have issues to deal with related to their children and school and lots of different things that would keep them busy. But the truth of the matter is that having children actually is associated with more involvement in the business, as well as desire to be involved in the future. So if you look down our middle column, the generation below 40, 87% with children are currently involved, 62% without children are involved. And as interesting below, not having children suggests that you may not have a plan to be involved in the future. So there's a much higher number of people who don't plan to be involved either now or in the future in the not having children bucket. So it's almost as if having children connects you to the enterprise. And that's something to be mindful of, because as we all know, sort of across the world, the size of families is decreasing. The number of people having children is decreasing, and the age at which people are having children is rising. And so if children are a connection point to the family enterprise, but there are fewer children and families and they're coming later, it suggests a need to reach out to that audience in your family group that may not have children yet and try to connect them to the family enterprise. We also took a look at where next gens are involved in the family enterprise. We asked, what's your current role? Of the below 40 generation, we had 19% already in a CEO position. We had almost a quarter on board of directors. We also had a number in senior executive or mid-level executive positions. So a lot of involvement with the business. A couple of things that are highlighted with red arrows that may be a little bit concerning. One is that we have a pretty low representation of the below 30 audience in either a family council or some governing body of the family. This is something that the research team had noted in general in our work with family enterprises, is that we're tending to see less interest in the family governance for younger generations. And this is concerning because we all believe that having healthy and strong family governance is important to the success of a family enterprise. And over time, if there's waning interest in that area, that could be problematic for families. So it's something to take a look at in your own family. The other thing we saw, and this ties back to Andrea's comments at the beginning as well, a concern around the fact that we didn't have as high representation of next generation members who are either what we would call intrapreneurs, pursuing new ideas within the family business, or entrepreneurs outside the family, but working with family support to develop new ideas. So intrapreneurs at 7% and entrepreneurs at almost 5%. We would hope that families are encouraging more entrepreneurship within their systems to revitalize their business and the economic engine of their business. And the fact that we're seeing less than we might have hoped in that next generation suggests a desire, or on our part, or an effort to promote families encouraging entrepreneurship in younger generations to help revitalize their businesses. I mentioned in the beginning that we see that generations are largely aligned on the strategic agenda for the business. We asked a number of questions around what you think the business should be focused on. You'll see these on the left. They include sustainability, digital transformation, professionalization of the business, training, talent, attraction and retention, encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship, internationalizing, diversifying. And what you'll see is that largely the numbers are similar in the over 40 and below 40 audience, although the ones highlighted in green are ones where there was a significant difference, even though the numbers are high. You'll notice in general that the numbers are higher for the under 40 audience than they are for the over 40, suggesting that the under 40s see more need for change in the business than the over 40s do. We also wanted to take a look at people's values, and the way we did that was looking at their prioritization or interest in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals published by the UN. The question we asked is, how important are these Sustainable Development Goals to your enterprise? So not personally how important they are to you, but how important they are to your enterprise. We list the top group in priority order across the sample. What you'll see is very little differentiation between the above 40 and the under 40 group and what they see as these top ranking. We do see, by the way, if you have an opportunity to read in the report, some very significant differentiation around the world in terms of how people view the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals. And then not surprisingly, the top goals tend to be more related to business-oriented goals. So number 1 across the board, economic growth, number 2, education, and number 3, building resilient infrastructures. So I want to turn to my colleagues, Neus and Maria Jose, to talk about the aspirations for the future. We've covered where the next gen is today, and now we're going to talk about where they want to go. So Neus and Maria Jose.
Thank you, Jennifer. So following this line, when thinking about successors and how families were addressing their development, we needed to ask first family members their aspirations for the future regarding their participation in the family enterprise. So we will cover what the data tell us regarding this. So we asked participants who had previously responded that they were involved in the family enterprise or in related family activities, or that they had the intention to take part in it in the future, what role they would like to have within the family enterprise in the next 5 years. So taking a close look at their responses, in particularly at the data highlighted in green, the overall results in this section suggest that younger generations are very interested in future leadership roles related to family business operation and governance, but with less interest in family council or family governance roles. So for example, as you can see in the table, younger generation members express more interest in senior executive roles compared to older members, 21% versus 9.1%. And this may suggest that the older or more senior respondents either are already in operating roles or are no longer interested in these positions given their life stage, and therefore they are more attracted to governance roles compared to younger generations. It is also worth noting that comparatively, there is a low interest in entrepreneurial activity in both generational groups. Next slide, please, Jennifer. And regarding how much the responses are colored by gender, what we can see is that men within the enterprise show more inclination than women towards occupying the highest level operating and governance roles. And for example, we can see that 32.1% of men versus 24.1% of women are interested in the CEO role, and 39.1 versus 29% are interested in board membership. Women, on the other hand, show greater interest than men in contributing to the family council and in executive roles in family philanthropic entities. So this is something that we will need to take a closer look within families. Therefore, the responses in this section may also reflect a lack of awareness or sometimes a lack of knowledge in younger generations of the relevance of family governance for the continuity of the family enterprise, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, but also, and in the same line regarding entrepreneurship. And so in general, the data in this section may pose a challenge both in ensuring next generation voice in family governance and in the succession process in these critical roles, but also it poses another challenge, which is in which ways families can find ways to steward the entrepreneurial legacy of founding generation. And I now hand over to Maria Jose, who will shed light on the perceptions of respondents regarding their development for their envisioned future roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Neus. Following the conversation that we have had so far, basically what we have seen is that next generation members are quite interested in getting involved in the family business. And what is probably very, very nice and interesting is that they are really preparing themselves to take over these roles that they want to pursue in the future. So what we see is that over 80% of the different members that have answered this questionnaire say that they are preparing to take over these roles. And we see evidently that younger generations are more prone to prepare themselves for these positions. This makes a lot of sense because probably they don't have the experience or the expertise of generations over 40. And I think that what is interesting also to highlight is that this brings two important aspects. No, one is the commitment and the interest of the next generation in taking over these roles, and also to be highly prepared to continue pursuing this enterprise forward and probably take it to the next generation. And second, we see also the role of females in preparing themselves, as we can see in the second part of the graph, female versus males, that almost 80% in both cases are also preparing themselves, even though we see that males seem to be preparing themselves more than women. This has probably one important reason, and this is related to the life cycle, right? Because when we see the third square, we see that having children and not having children makes a difference when thinking about preparing yourself to take over these positions. So what we observe is that people with children have probably less time, or less willingness to spend time in preparing themselves, whereas those who have not children are highly, let's say, embedded in preparing themselves, 88% versus 82%. So what is interesting to see from our perspective is that younger generations and older generations and females and males are preparing themselves to take over important roles in the company. And as we are going to see in the next slide, what we can observe here is how well do you see yourself prepared to assume a specific role. And here what we can take away is that family members feel more prepared to take over non-managerial roles. So for instance, we see that being a shareholder of the family enterprise or participating as a non-voting member of the board of directors have high percentages, 4.4, 4.2, or a member of the family council. But when we see the general management position or a member of the board of directors, but the board of directors is high, the general management position is 3.8 in the generations over 40. So what it seems to be is that family members perceive that you need, or either you are more prepared or you need less preparation to take over non-managerial roles in that sense, right? And it's also interesting to see, of course, that generations above 40 and generations below 40 have different perceptions in that sense. This means that generations below 40 feel less prepared to take these roles, as we see in the percentages. With this, I hand over the word to Maria, who will explain basically which actions they need to take in order to prepare themselves. Thank you. You are muted, Maria.
I was waiting for that expression that gets so famous during the pandemic, right? Good morning from Mexico, and thank you all for your participation in this survey. As we can see with this slide, is that this is a question that we ask only to those below 40. So this is our gen below 40, and we ask you to pick three out of these options in which they see how or which one will help them to develop and add more value to the business, to the family business. And as we can see, and it's pretty much aligned to what my friends have said already, is and taking into account that, as Jennifer said, those of you who participated in our survey are somehow very prompt to the what is it that requires to be part of that family or enterprising family. So in getting more business knowledge, through different ways of either more degrees or some training in specialization, as well as developing the leadership skills, or even working outside the family enterprise, where the three top ways or choices for those below 40 to add value in their own development or their career development for the business and also for the family as well. Although, as I mentioned, we asked the respondents to pick 3 of them, and those are the 3 on the highest priority. Of course, there are recognition for being part of the family business and non-managerial roles are very important, and recognizing that it's very relevant, not only being in the business, but also other governance bodies. So next slide, please. We also want to share some of the divergent perspectives that we were trying to find among our 2 groups, generations over 40 and generation below 40. So here, in regard to the next generation's development needs to get ready for those senior positions, the senior roles, both generations agree on fostering practical business knowledge, as I already showed in the slide before, and leadership skills. So you can see the second item in our table, transfer practical knowledge about the family enterprise, was pretty much the same for both groups. But the younger generation does not mirror the older generation's emphasis on modeling the family values and the culture, the way they do things, or they do business. And I will ask you to pay attention to that line. Where is it? The first one, sorry, is modeling the family's work ethic or the way of doing things. You can see generation is 52 compared to 23 in the counterpart, the below 40. And as I mentioned as well, well, the younger generation wants to the older generations also to have a more open and to receive with a flexibility the new ideas in the workplace or the family business context. And as we can see that right in the 4th item, be more open or receptive to the next generation's new ideas for the business. So younger generation is asking to be more inclusive for their ideas in the business. So there are many opportunities for both groups or cohorts. And I leave it there for you, Jennifer. Thank you.
We're now going to move on to some differences across countries, and I think Winnie will join us for that.
Okay, thanks, Maria, and thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. It's great to see all of you online. I'm going to share with you some differences across countries, but before that, I'd like to emphasize that we see more similarities, in fact, than differences around the world. Okay, next slide. Okay, the first difference, okay, the importance of philanthropic giving. Okay, when the people were asked this question, could you indicate how important is philanthropic giving to you in your life? I can say that most of the people actually believe it's very important, but we can see some differences across countries. And the rankings in the United States and in China rank higher than other countries. I think the difference is actually are likely to be affected by cultural, legal, and tax contexts in each country. But it's also very interesting to note that, the results is highly positively correlated with the size of the family business. And, the size of the family business in the United States and in China, within our data, actually is larger than other countries. Okay, please, next one. The involvement in family enterprise activities, again, we see some differences. And Chile and China, we compare the difference between female and male. So, Chile and China, we get most of the significant differences. In women in Chile and in China, actually they're less involved in family enterprise activities. For example, in China, the traditional Chinese, we tend to, prefer, son to inherit the business, but not the daughters. That could be the reason. But you look at the absolute number, United States, 95% of the respondents actually are involved in the family enterprise activities. And there's no difference between women and men. Okay, next slide. Okay, drivers of change in the family enterprise, again, Chile and China. We ask, no matter what kind of categories of people we ask within the two countries, we actually find similar answers from them. Okay, for Chile, most of those people, different kind of people, they actually think political and social uncertainty is the most important driver for the change. I think that's in line with the the current social political issues in Chile. And in China, okay, most of the respondents think competition in our market is the most important driver of change. I think that the reason could be China is a big and dynamic and fast developing country, so it can be very competitive as well. So that's the end of my sharing. Jennifer, please take over.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you to the rest of the team for joining us and sharing some of these interesting findings. As you can see, we're just sort of getting to the tip of the iceberg and what we're seeing here. There's a lot going on within this data, and we're really excited for you all to be able to see the entire survey responses. But we want to wrap up and talk in just the final few minutes about where do we go from here? What do we learn from this? What are our sort of call to action to you as family enterprise owners out there? And also keep mindful of, we will have a few minutes at the end here, so feel free to pose questions to us. If you would prefer to pose those questions in Spanish, we can respond to them as well if you send them in that way. So where do we go from here? Good news, as we've said, next gen family members are committed to the family enterprise. They are involved, they're planning to be involved, and they're taking steps to prepare themselves. So very encouraging to know that that audience is out there. There's also alignment on the strategic agenda largely. One of our greatest concerns that we wanted to take a look at through this data was, is there a generational disconnect in terms of what people see as the agenda for their business going forward? If you desire to keep your business within your family, but you don't have agreement in the younger audience about what needs to happen for the business to make that happen, that's really important. So we think you've got this alignment. Start to engage your next generation in dialogue about what they see for the business for the future. From my seat at Kellogg, where I have MBA students as well as next gen family members come through other education programs, I think the biggest frustration is not knowing how to come to the table and be heard for that audience under 40. So encourage you to consider engaging them in dialogue. They're more aligned than you may think in terms of what they hope or aspire for the business and what they see as the strategic agenda. Our two watch out points: Pay attention to females in the enterprise as well as those without children. Those are your risk points for people being less engaged. There's a great talent pool out there, and need to think about who those people might be and how you engage them in dialogue going forward. Another watch out, pay attention to the family system and its governance. We see less interest or importance placed on involvement in family governance in younger generations. If those people don't step up in the future, that the value and the strength of that family governance system is going to decrease. So again, need to think about how you perpetuate or develop some interest in the family system and its governance in that next generation. Our biggest difference across generation was, what do I need to develop myself for the future? You know, we saw in the fact that the elder generation believes that it's about passing on values. Younger generation wants to see investment in their career path. They want to know what's next for them as they come into the business. You know, a lot of families now expect their next generation members to go out and get a good college degree, to work somewhere else, possibly get an MBA from a top institution. Once they've invested all this in themselves, next generations want to know that there's going to be a path for them to move through their family enterprise and to take on increasing responsibility. So thinking about what that path may look like, frankly, is important for next gen family members, as well as really strong, high potential employees that are younger in your business. We see more and more that people are expecting that they understand what they're committing to in terms of a career path. And by the way, in that career path, again, a concern we were seeing is less focus on entrepreneurship and innovation within the business than we would like to see to continue to regenerate your family's legacy. So think about where taking risks, where bringing in new ideas, and where entrepreneurship may fit into that career path for younger family members. And last, engage in a constructive intergenerational dialogue to build a roadmap to engage that next generation. Ask them the questions about what's important to be engaged. Again, if your goal is to steward this business to the next generation, but that next generation isn't interested in coming, you've got a problem. So the good news is you can use this research. We encourage you to take the study back to your families, have people read it and talk about it. Does this data that we're seeing here represent what our family looks like? Where are the concerns within our family about, and how we might engage them going forward? I continue to refer to the study. This is what it looks like. We will be sending it out to those who participated today, as well as, I think, for all of our institutions, you're able to access the research through our various centers' research sites. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you don't get a copy of the study, we would love to see it broadly distributed. Thanks again to Julia Spar for the support in helping to do this for our entire research team. And now I would like to open it up to questions from the audience if there's anything out there that you'd like to learn a little bit more about. John, any questions out there that we can answer for the audience?
Yes, Jennifer, we have two questions, at least by now. You can write your questions in Spanish if you want, if you are more comfortable with that. But we have two questions in English. I'm gonna read the first one. Please, team, be prepared to answer this question. First, you mentioned that women show greater interest than men in family council and foundation executive roles than men, and less interest than men in operating or leading roles in the family business. What are the implications of these findings for families, and how we can change these tendencies?
Hi, John, I'm happy to answer that.
Yes, please, Neus.
So I believe that, and I think that we share this belief with all the team because we discussed this, that the active participation of women in any role, whether in operational or governance roles or as committed owners, is key, as it broadens the pool of management and governance talent available to family businesses. And from our work with families over the past 25 years, we have learned that the role of women, although maybe it has not been reflected in the survey, but has evolved significantly, and that the range of options for daughters and women in general has expanded. And there are certainly some things that families can do to increase women's interest and involvement, such as education about the opportunities and benefits of involving women and creating an awareness of the cost associated with not having them involved. Another option would be to institutionalize a mentoring program that can offer women some guidance and support from senior executive and managers to orient them to leadership roles. And maybe a third one that I can think about now is maybe one of the important things that we recommend or suggest to families always is to clarify the roles that women, but also thinking about successors, thinking about daughters and sons, clarify the roles that they can envision and creating a structure to maintain their collaboration as owners and managers. These are some ideas that families can consider to increase their participation, or at least to increase them considering their involvement in family enterprises. I'm sure others in the team can complement that.
Thank you, Neus.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Perhaps Maria Jose or Winnie or Jennifer would like to, or Maria would like to.
I have something to add to what Neus has said, and that is that the broader concept of enterprising families comes to this time, and it's getting more relevance to do those type of roles, I believe. And not only we see that in our survey, but I believe that we have been paying much attention to the business as the operational roles than others that have more impact, more purpose in their, not only the next gen, but also the current generation are becoming more purpose oriented, and it goes beyond the enterprise operational roles, I believe.
Okay, anyone else? Well, we have another question by now. Remember, you can write your questions in the chat section of the platform. Please do it in Spanish or in English. If it is in Chinese, only Winnie can answer that, and can read that question and answer it. Okay, the question number 2 is the following one. Younger generations seem to be quite engaged in preparing themselves to join active roles in the family business. Why do you think they feel more prepared to join non-managerial roles, as you mentioned?
Well, maybe I can take over these
Okay,
questions as it was related to the part I presented. Thank you. I guess it has to do with something that we were discussing before. These younger generations probably feel that they need to prepare quite a lot to get into managerial roles because they lack the experience and the expertise of the previous generation. And this has one advantage, which is they want to prepare themselves, and also the disadvantage of having this heavy, I would say, backpack of we have to do it equally or better than the previous generation. And this is something that is always there. So I think that what we need to do is to work on both parts. One, yes, they need to prepare themselves. Two, they need to avoid thinking that they have to be always compared with the previous generation, because they can build their own pathway and they can bring a lot of new or a lot of transformation to the business. So I think these are the two things that they have to take into consideration. And regarding the non-managerial roles, I think probably this is because they have not been engaged yet in non-managerial roles if they are younger. So they really are not aware probably of the needs of really developing yourself as a responsible owner, to put it this way. So I think that we have to be aware of the need to be very well prepared for all these roles and to really engage in lifelong learning for that. Probably my colleagues want to also add something to that.
Okay. Do we have more questions, Jennifer? Would you like to
There are a few questions that have come in the Q&A that I thought we could address quickly and help give you a little more.
Yes, we have another section.
Yeah, in the
I mean,
Q&A.
preguntas y respuestas or questions and answers. Please go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, so one question was around elaborating more on the philanthropic interests. You know, I think to some extent, we didn't see as high of engagement with philanthropic interest in family enterprise as we may. The highest was in the US. I think that's to some extent driven by cultural difference in terms of how philanthropic giving is benefited financially in the US versus other places. But there, I don't know if others saw things in their countries specifically around philanthropic interests. Ours was definitely very high in the US, kind of across all generations. Typically females higher interest in philanthropic giving than males. I think it goes back to these gender roles that we put in place, the assumption that women would be more involved with foundations than men possibly, which I think frankly is a loss because there's a great opportunity across genders to contribute in philanthropic giving. Anyone else of the team comments on the philanthropy piece?
I think, Jennifer, I would add that at least in Europe, what we are seeing is that families are thinking about philanthropy in different ways right now, and I think that we need to still delve in some of the experiences that we all have shared and in the data to understand if some people see philanthropy more into the impact investment side of their family office and portfolio, and rather than philanthropy in more traditional way with a family foundation. And we are seeing a lot of this in at least in Europe, and this is also driven by all the legal content environment that family enterprises have to follow up here, in this geography. But I think that I completely agree that philanthropy is something that we need to pay attention to, because also we know that philanthropic families, philanthropy is an activity that supports transgenerational continuity and the transgenerational continuity of the legacy of the family enterprise. So this is something that we need to pay attention to as well.
I think if we can wrap up with one last question. We had a question around the drivers of change. What are the global results, not only by country, and particularly related to political risk? And I know Winnie had a point of view on that question, so I thought I would throw it to her. What are particularly political risk and the drivers of change? What does that look like globally?
If you're asking about the exact numbers, so I can give you 21% of the Chile respondent. They think that political risk is the highest. Okay, so this is the most significant, highest scores across the 5 countries. So if you want to know details, I think please refer to the white paper. Okay, the white paper is on page 77.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank everyone and pass it back over to John. There's so much in this survey, a lot that we couldn't cover in this webinar. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of the researchers at the institutions to learn more about some findings that may be interesting to you and how you can use them to start a dialogue within your family about cross-generational differences. John.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Well, we have several more questions, but we don't have more time to answer them. I'm sorry. We will do afterwards by mail or by other means. But by now, I would like to thank every one of you that have participated in this global webinar, and of course, many thanks to my team, Maria Jose, Winnie, Neus, and of course, Jennifer. Would you like to say goodbye to the audience as well?
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you very much. And
we will send you the report, the white paper afterwards. I mean, for those of you that have attended this conference, and also to others that registered but couldn't attend. Also, we have recorded this presentation. So for countries like China, where now is 11 p.m., those people, or Mexico, that it's too early, I mean, at the beginning of this conference, and all the rest that want to have this recording, we will send you not only the report, but also the recording presentation.